Every strategy to retire early works, all of them, which is exactly why almost nobody pulls it off. You've run the number at least once, probably at night in your phone's calculator after a workday that made you wonder how many more of those you have left. Annual spending times 25. Then you looked at it for 4 seconds and closed the app because either that number was impossible or it was possible, which is somehow worse. Possible just means it's a question of what you'll hand over and for how long. My name is Nick, and today we're going through every strategy for hitting it early. Lean, fat, coast, barista, geo-arbitrage, real estate, and a government loophole almost nobody knows about. Underneath it all, one equation in different costumes. Delia schedules surgeries outside Dayton for $61,000 a year. Wendell already did this, retired at 44, mows his lawn Tuesday mornings while his street is at work, and one of them is about to learn the hardest part of this has nothing to do with the market. So start with that equation because once you see it, every strategy here stops looking like a strategy and starts looking like a costume. You take what you spend in a year and divide it by the percentage you can safely pull from a portfolio annually. If that's 4, you're just multiplying your spending by 25. Spend 40,000, you need $1 million. That's the whole movement. Everything else is arguing about the 2 numbers you plug in. And here's what makes it cruel. Your savings rate pulls both levers at once. Every dollar you don't spend gets invested, so your pile grows faster, and it's also deleted from your target, so the finish line runs backward into your arms. Mr. Money Mustache published a table in 2012 that broke a lot of brains. At 5% real returns, save 10% of your take home and you work 51 years. 50%, 17, 75%, 7 years from 0. And it isn't a scam, it's just arithmetic. But that 5% real return is doing an enormous amount of unpaid labor, and it comes back to bite everything, none of which means anything until you see it on an actual kitchen table. So here's Delia's. She's 34, 61,000 gross. After federal tax, Ohio state tax, FICA, and the 3% she puts in to get the match, she takes home $38.50 a month. Rent, $11.50. Car payment, $420. And before you say anything, it's a 4-year-old Corolla. Insurance, $145. Gas, $160, because nothing in her county is walkable, and the hospital is 19 miles each way. Groceries, $420, which is why there's a chest freezer in the garage, because bulk chicken only makes sense if you can store it. Utilities and phone, $310. Student loan, $230. Health premium, $180. And $200 toward her mother's prescriptions, which isn't a line item in any budgeting app, but is absolutely a line item in her life. $32.15. She has $635 left before a single unplanned thing happens. Before the alternator, before the dentist, before a birthday. Now put $635 into the equation. She spends about $38,600 a year, so her number at 25 times is $965,000. Saving every remaining dollar at 7%, she gets there in 33 years. She's 34, that's 67. So doing everything right, sacrificing nothing further because there is nothing further, early retirement for her means retiring 2 years late. Keep 635 in your head because every strategy we're about to walk through is just a different way of attacking it. With Lean Fire, you shrink the target instead of growing the pile, spending under $40,000 a year. Some run it at 18 to 24, which is less a retirement plan and more a dare. At 3.5%, a $25,000 life needs $714,000. A $40,000 life needs $1.14 million. That gap is $400,000 of your time bought by wanting less. And notice something. Delia's already there. Lean Fire asks you to sacrifice down into her number. She's been standing in it since she was 26. For her, it isn't a strategy, it's a description. Fat Fire is the opposite. Over $100,000 a year, $2.5 million minimum, and you don't get there on frugality. You get there on income. Chubby Fire sits in between, where you retire early and still replace a transmission without calling a family meeting about it. Now, Coast Fire, criminally underrated, and it brings in Roman. 38 sells software in Austin, makes $240,000, and has a spreadsheet named after the date he intends to quit. Optimized for a date instead of a life. And I say that with affection because I have absolutely been that guy. Here's the idea. You front load hard, then stop contributing entirely and let compounding finish while you keep a job that only has to cover your current life. You're not retired, you're just done saving forever. The math runs backward from your target. Want 1.5 million by 60 and you're 30. Divide it by 1.07 to the 30th power, about 7.61. That's $197,000. Get that invested by 30, never add another dollar, and you've got $1.5 million at 60. That's the one thing I'd want you to take from this video. So if it's landing, a like helps it reach people still doing that math at midnight and closing the appy. Roman hits his coast number in 2 years. Delia needs 11. Same math, wildly different door. With Barista FIRE, you build most of the pile, then work part-time mainly for the insurance. It's named after the fact that Starbucks gives part-timers health benefits, which says something slightly grim about this country, and it hides an advantage. If you need $40,000 a year and 15 comes from a job, you're only pulling 25 from the portfolio. A 40% cut in withdrawals during exactly the window when withdrawals do the most damage. Hold that thought, because that window decides more outcomes than your savings rate does. Flamingo FIRE is the same idea at half the number, and SlowFi is the objection to all of it, which says grinding at 70% for 7 years to escape a life you hate might be worse than building one you don't need to escape. Harder to spreadsheet, but I don't think it's wrong. Okay, those are the costumes you can wear with a normal job. Now, the 4 that require you to change something structural about your life, and this is where Delia's 635 finally starts to move. Geo arbitrage attacks the denominator directly, swinging your number by 30 to 70%. The life that costs you $90,000 in Seattle costs $45,000 across much of the Midwest. This is the one lever that genuinely moves for Delia, and it's why she keeps a Zillow tab open on a town in Tennessee she's never visited. Cut her rent by $350, drop the state income tax, and her 635 becomes $1,100, which pulls 33 years down to 22. The catch is paperwork. Go international, and it's proof of passive income, tax treaties, residency day counts. Geo arbitrage is real. It just isn't a vibe. It's a filing cabinet. Real estate is where you probably think the shortcut lives, and in 2021, it kind of did, not now. With mortgages near 6.4% and investment loans near 8%, properties that clear the old 1% rule still bleed cash every month. House hacking still works, though, for a boring reason. You buy a duplex, rent the other half, and you haven't added income so much as deleted your largest expense. For Delia, that nearly triples her surplus without earning another dollar. Dividends are the emotional strategy where you build a portfolio, throwing off enough that you never sell a share. But when a company pays a dividend, the share price drops by roughly that amount. Your own money handed back with a bow on it. And the strategy behind most Fat Fire stories? Selling a business. That's not a savings rate, that's a liquidity event. Finally, if you work for the government, you may already have a door, the rest of us don't. 20 years in the military gets you a lifetime pension in your early 40s plus health coverage. And then the quiet one. If you have a governmental 457B, there's no 10% penalty at any age once you separate. Not 59.5, not 55, any age, quit at 42, and you draw the next month. Just don't roll it into an IRA because that kills it permanently. Which brings us to the part that actually stops people, because knowing your number is trivial next to touching it. Most of your money sits behind a fence the government built at 59.5. Retire at 45, and you've got 14 years to bridge. Early retirement stops being a savings problem here and becomes a plumbing problem. 3 pipes get you through. With Rule 72, you commit to a fixed withdrawal schedule and the penalty disappears. At 50 with 400,000, you pull about 24,000 a year. Break it early though, and the IRS retroactively penalizes every distribution you ever took with interest. The Roth conversion ladder is the elegant one. You convert traditional money to Roth each year, pay the tax, wait 5 tax years, and that principal comes out clean. Build a 5-year cash bridge first, start converting, and by year 6, it feeds you continuously. Every conversion runs its own clock, so start 5 years before you need $1 of it. And simplest of all, your direct Roth contributions come out anytime, tax and penalty free. Not the earnings, just what you put in. That's the most flexible money you own, and you probably didn't know it was sitting there. Which brings us back to Wendell, who ran every one of those pipes correctly, then opened an envelope in January. He's at the kitchen table, coffee going cold, holding a renewal notice saying his health insurance now costs more than his mortgage did. Not his mortgage now, his mortgage back when he still had one. Because if you retire before 65, you buy your own insurance every year until Medicare. That was survivable, while enhanced subsidies made marketplace plans cheap. Those expired January 1st, 2026. The House passed a 3-year extension, the Senate hasn't moved it, and the subsidy cliff came back. Here's what a cliff means. At 400% of the federal poverty level, one more dollar of income doesn't shrink your subsidy. It deletes it, all of it. A 60-year-old couple just over that line is looking at roughly $22,600 a year in premiums, and about 4 million people are projected to lose coverage. And here's what makes it vicious for you as an early retiree. Roth conversions raise your income. So does harvesting gains. Both are things this exact strategy tells you to do. Wendell's conversion put him $900 over the line. $900, and the subsidy vanished. So congratulations, you've traded a job you were allowed to quit for a premium you aren't. By the way, if you want the skills to build income outside a paycheck in the first place, I opened a school community where I break down how to scale a faceless YouTube channel from zero. No catch, links below. Now let's get to the number this whole movement rests on and why the man who invented it doesn't believe it anymore. It comes from William Bengen in 1994. He tested every rolling 30-year retirement window back to 1926, and the worst survived at 4.15%. The Trinity study turned that into success tables, and the number entered folklore. Now, catch the 2 words in there that break everything. 30 years. He was answering a question about a 65-year-old. Retire at 40 and you're planning for 50, so your number has to come down. Kitch is found stretching to 45 years, drops it to 3.5. And run it across 21 countries instead of just America, and Germany, Italy, and Japan all needed 3 to 3.5. Which is a polite way of saying the 4% rule is partly a monument to America having an unusually good century. Meanwhile, Morningstar just put it at 3.9, and Bengen himself revised his own number up to 4.7, saying his original test was too narrow. So the father of the rule says 4.7. Morningstar says 3.9. The researchers say 3.5. On $1 million, that's $12,000 a year of disagreement about the most important number you'll ever pick. But here's what matters more, and it's that window I told you to hold on to. Sequence of returns risk. You and I can earn the identical average return over 20 years and land in completely different universes based purely on the order those returns showed up in. If your first 3 years are bad, you're selling shares into a decline to fund your life, permanently shrinking the base that has to recover. The same losses in year 18 barely touch you because by then your portfolio has grown past carrying, which makes the date you retire a risk factor all by itself. And it's why Barista FIRE's 40% withdrawal cut is stronger than it looks. Now, the honest center of all this, every number I've given you came out of American market history, and most of the success stories you've read came out of one stretch, 2010 to 2021, when the market did roughly 13% a year. Vanguard now projects 3.9 to 5.9 over the next decade. JP Morgan says 6 to 6.7. Neither is 13, and that table assumed 5% real. Drop it to 2 and 17 years quietly becomes a lot more than 17. Then there's the thing underneath everything. Median household income is about $83,700. Average household spending is about $78,500. That's an implied savings rate around 6%, not 50. 6. The median for 01k balance in Vanguard's 2026 report is $44,115. The average is $167,970, and that gap is the whole story because the average sits near the 75th percentile. 1 in 4 has less than 10,000, and per the Federal Reserve, roughly 46% of households have no retirement account at all. And it's easy to say 6% like it's a statistic. It isn't. It feels like standing in the pharmacy line deciding which of 2 prescriptions can wait until the 15th. Like watching your check engine light come on and doing nothing for 6 weeks on purpose as a strategy. Like a Zillow tab for a town you'll never move to, open on your phone for 11 months. Like running that 25 times math one more time, getting the same answer and closing the app again. So put Delia and Roman side by side because this is what the movement won't say out loud. Delia saves $635 out of $38.50, 16%, and it's genuinely quietly impressive. Roman takes home $12,900 a month and spends $100,000 a year, leaving him $4,500 without thinking about it once. 35% achieved by accident, same discipline, same podcasts. He saves 7 times what she does on 4 times the income because your savings rate isn't linear with income, it's convex. Every dollar above your fixed costs is almost entirely savable, and hers eat 84% of what she earns. 50% is a rounding error at $240,000 and a physical impossibility at $61,000. What gets sold to you as a discipline problem is, for most of this country, a distribution problem wearing a personal virtue costume. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Nick, but people obviously do this. I've seen the videos. I've read the blogs. Fair. So let me be straight about what you're looking at. You're looking at survivors, people who retired at 40 and had it work, write blog posts about it. People who quietly went back in year 6 don't. More than 7% of previously retired 55 to 64-year-olds returned to work at the recent peak, and AARP found 28% said they'd retired too early. You'll never see one in your feed. The genre selects for winners, then sells you the winners as the base rate, which brings us to the failure mode I promised you at the start. You assume this goes wrong by running out of money. It doesn't. Kitch has found the 4% rule leaves you with more than double your starting principal in about 2/3 of historical periods. And at 3.5% over 50 years, half the time, you finish with more than 9 times what you started with. 9 times. Let me say that again because it's the most important sentence in this video. 9 times what you started with. Half the time. So if you do everything right, run the spreadsheets, skip the vacations, drive the Corolla into the ground, you most likely die with millions you were too careful to spend, funding a catastrophe that never showed up. Not poverty, unspent life. So here's where I land. Every strategy here is legitimate, and Coast Fire in particular is the most useful idea in personal finance you've probably never heard of. But notice what none of them are. None of them are a personality. You don't have to declare yourself a member of a movement, optimize your life into a rounding error, or answer to a spreadsheet like it's a landlord. And if you're sitting there doing the 25 times math on your own spending and feeling something drop in your stomach, You're not behind. Your income was never structured to make a 50% savings rate possible, and that's information about the system, not a verdict on you. Delia isn't retiring at 40, but Delia in Tennessee, house hacking a duplex, running a coast number instead of a retirement number, stops saving at 49. She'll still work. She just won't owe her future anything. Nobody sells a course on that because it doesn't photograph well. So run your coast number tonight. Take what you'd want at 60, divide it by 1.07 raised to the years between now and then, and look at what it takes to stop saving forever. 4 minutes. It'll tell you more about your real options than any 30-part series on financial independence will. And that school community is where you'll find the other half of this, the part where you build income instead of just rationing what's left. Quick reminder, I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice. It's educational, and your results depend on your own decisions, because every strategy to retire early is the same strategy underneath. Buy back your time before you run out of the health to enjoy it. The costumes only decide how long that takes and how much of your life you hand over on the way. Don't optimize your way into being the richest person in the cemetery.